that kind of matrix here, right? So we've got our utopia and we have our dystopia. If you guys look at your presenter notes, this is speaking to you as social starters, the case being used here is the economic recession, right? So just the dotted line is sort of, a utopian economy where everything's growing and we're, 5% unemployment, doing really well, and the one in between is dystopian. And then what we say to the fellows is, take your assumptions and kind of create like a middle case assumption, right? So my assumption is that gas is going to rise at the rate that it has historically risen at. All right, and so gas is going to go up a couple cents every month, and I'm assuming that it's here, right? And I'm assuming that people are going to keep buying luxury goods, and there's not going to be a price. It's not going to spike up, but they're going to buy. Right? I create a middle case scenario somewhere between utopia and dystopia, right? Reality, supposedly. All right, and if things go according to reality, notice this though. Notice that my imagined strategy when I was started as an entrepreneur is kind of just driving straight up the middle. I'm going to just kill. Everything's going to work out. I'm going to have it. When you do your assumptions, even in your real strategy, even when you're saying, once you do that research, you're like, well, actually, gas has been rising a little faster lately than I was thinking about it rising. So let's kind of put it a little bit more close to the dystopian side. And then, it looks like the stock market's really coming back, and my customers own a lot of stock in this field, so I think it's going to get better fast. So I'm going to kind of be a little more positive leaning. And then what you realize is that you're actually building a strategy that takes into account a lot of potential futures, and your assumptions have to be planned according to those. However, you also need to be aware that you could have a radically different future. Where you could have a radically different future where, something happens that's closer to these lines. And if you haven't prepared for that, and you haven't, stockpiled your product, you could face a potentially crippling crisis. All right? Okay, who's lost here? Who's with me?
I'm just sitting here thinking from the fellow's perspective that there are going to be a lot of questions about the specifics of this tool. For me, I just had the question, am I charting this out chronologically? Am I following my storyboard? Am I, let's say something like the stock market in year one, I have a, utopian vision, and then also in year three, a dystopian vision, and how that affects.
All right, so something that's important to do is to actually point out that this can be done for a week, 3 days, a program that you're doing, right? We're doing an idea slam in Portland. Why? Because we want to ultimately have Portland is one of our clients that is implementing a Present Tense Fellowship so that they're able to mobilize their Jewish community, et cetera, et cetera. We can do this assumption-based planning to prepare for that event in Portland. For example, I'm going out there to present this thing called the Idea Slam. What if there is a snowstorm tomorrow in New York City and I can't get on the flight? Has Present Tense prepared for that scenario by ensuring that there is a social starter from another city who's prepared to go as an alternate if I can't get there, and thereby ensuring that we don't have to cancel the Idea Slam but can still do it and therefore get the momentum towards the sale? We have not. So essentially I've not prepared for that potential thing. What happens if there's a really big, God forbid someone in the community passes away and there's a huge funeral right at the time of our Idea Slam? This has actually happened, and no one's coming to our Idea Slam. Has President prepared a strategy to achieve the same goal that the Idea Slam would have achieved without having the Idea Slam or having only 10, 15 people at the Idea Slam as opposed to the amount that we want? Right? That's the type of thinking that helps you as a seed stage entrepreneur, someone launching something new, get through the kind of early pitfalls that are created by assumptions. So while I think the tool, and Shelby is correct, and this is a great note for all of us who are teaching it, looks, I've been using these examples of oil and gas and whatnot because they're, for me at least, very easy to grasp. Really, this is a great tool for all the very small steps that we are taking towards being successful. A funder of mine got, a very important funder just died last week. Well, what happens? What if the checks are delayed? What if they don't want to fund me anymore? What if his wife is not excited about what I'm doing, and he was my guy, and now there are all sorts of questions like that can come up. And assumption-based planning helps you kind of try and figure out what are the scenarios. So right, so if I take kind of the idea slam, I can imagine a utopian future. Everything goes great swimmingly when we get there. I can envision a dystopian future where everything starts falling away, and I can try and plan for that, or decide how much I want to plan for that. Shelby.
2 more questions.
Please.
So,
Guys, think also what other questions, imagining yourselves as fellows, so that we can improve the presentation.
So kind of helicopter, would you then, as a presenter, recommend that we associate those assumptions to activities and to inputs?
I think so.
So saying that, you're planning this activity and you're relying on certain inputs and you're, relying on the fact that there will be, like a space available or a printer that's affordable or.
Do you think that will help fellows get it? Go ahead.
I think if you skip the whole narrative thing and this whole sort of timeline thing and just went back to the inputs and said, okay, what are the inputs and actions? What are the, no less than 3 and no more than 10 things that have to happen to get from the left side to the right side of that chart? You put them up on a list. You can have a much clearer conversation now. You can say, okay, there are 10 things that we need to consider in a utopian and dystopian context.
Right. The reason that this is important, especially the experience component, is that, again, most fellows there are 2 very different things that we want fellows to think here. Fellows are sure of 2 things. They're sure they know what will work and what people want. They're also sure that things are going to go their way, that God is going to smile as they go forward. Those are the 2 things that you are trying to, in a sense, disabuse them of in this seminar. You're trying to say to them, wait, you need a plan for what you want people to experience, and to do that, you really need to get into their shoes and understand and bring them into the conversation, and thereby really map that out so that you generate those experiences rather than just believe that you can just do it because you know what you're doing. And you also have to realize that things are going to go wrong in pretty much all of the areas that you assumed, and you have to plan for that. So those are the two things that you don't want to lose as a presenter here. You think it's included in there?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't take you down a rabbit hole. I think if you had a list on the wall that said, number 1, your constituencies have to buy in. Okay, what if they don't buy in? Like, you can skip all of this. Because actually, without that, I think this actually makes a lot more sense. Personally.
Okay.
I like that. I mean, I like the idea of grids that have some fields populated and then offering others. Like even there, like the buy-in phase, because somehow there are certain things that aren't specified. It might be nice to have certain ones on that table that are like what Dan said, like, okay, your constituents have to buy in. Well, maybe, where do you get that buy-in? Or, I don't know, some checklist, because...
So, would it help to, in that slide, have the fields populated for the example?
Yeah.
So, Shelby, can you make a note of that for us on it? All right.
But
Could you something you did, I don't remember where it was, I feel like at some point you had one slide that was unpopulated, and then the next slide was totally.
We've done that in other presentations.
And that I think that
Okay.
worked well.
Right.
But this was, I really like the example of even looking at this for a week, because especially in the small scale entrepreneur, it's helpful. Like today, this morning, I made an assumption that my printer would work, because I wanted to print out all the slides on one sheet, right?
Right.
It didn't. I mean, it turns out I can easily make the same group planning grid for myself by hand, but like that, I wasn't prepared for that fact, so it sent me into a spiral. But even like those small things, I think it's interesting. Like, what about the plane, the snow that cancels it? Because for the small scale person, the small scale venture at its initial stage, like those things can send the whole thing, off course.
I'll give a real world example. We had a seminar that we had to teach in Boston. Ariel got caught in a snowstorm like a year ago, and we had to do it by Skype and have someone there who wasn't trained to try and do it. It was awful. I mean, it was great, good as could be, but it was very, very difficult. We made a rule that when there is a seminar happening, a person who can do it in a pinch, either the main presenter or a backup, needs to be within driving distance of that seminar the night before. Which means that if I have a seminar Sunday morning in Boston, I can't be in Atlanta with my family. I need to be in New York, because worst comes to worst, I could drive all night and I can make it to Boston for that seminar and pull through. And we had a situation where there was a breakdown with the train in Israel. Ariel missed his flight. He was supposed to be here doing the seminar. Because we established that kind of rule and built in that kind of scenario planning, we were able to fill in for the seminar on SocialStart. And that's kind of the thinking that the kind of learning that entrepreneurs can do to not repeat mistakes.
So then could we take the milestone and use the milestone as
Yeah, you could use a milestone and say, okay, a logo.
like make that the scenario.
Yeah, meaning this teaches you the internal strengths and weaknesses that you need to get your logo done. There are also external threats to getting your logo done that we have to consider.
So then we put it on this map and we can do
Yeah,
it that way.
okay, so
that translates to it?
somehow connect the,
Connecting storyboarding with ABT.
yeah, meaning actually using the same examples, the same charts, the same
We love AVP.
ABP is the based plan. That's what we're doing here.
All bond plan.
So now, if you took the milestone logo and then you translated it over to that line, is that like connected?
Oh, yeah, I like the idea of using a specific example in the APB, even like
Yeah.
that logo.
So the examples, I think the example of a conference planning or something is brings it home. The Portland example, I think, is a good.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, other comments, guys? This is really great. Keep them coming.
But it just,
I was just also gonna ask on that slide that once you draw out the actual strategy, then how do you use that?
Which slide, Shelby?
There, so you
Here?
have your management strategy and the line represents what actually happened.
Yeah.
So how would we teach what that is
Well, the
used
line,
for
when
and
you do
how,
when you do the planning, your strategy becomes much more realistic. Meaning when you actually do the ADP exercise and you say, okay, in this Portland plan that we want to have, right? My dream would be that Aharon gets on a plane tomorrow, goes to Portland, runs a great ideas plan where 500 people will apply to, and blah, 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 and then I get to my goal, which is to get Portland to come on board and to really do this great program. What really is going to happen because of ABP, meaning because of the real world that we live in, is, oh, I'm going to miss the flight, I'm going to this, I'm going to that, but eventually I get to my same outcome because I've planned appropriately and I've managed to figure out alternative ways to reach the same point of having Portland come on board next year as a CDP. Right? That would be the lesson from that slide.
got it. So the line represents what strategy you take into consideration or you actually implement.
The line is that imagine strategy the ideal. If everything goes well, I will go straight to the middle, drive right through the hole as a football running back and into the touchdown. In reality, because the blocker went where I didn't expect it, but I was prepared for that, I was able to keep moving forward towards my outcome, towards my goal, right? By using alternative strategies that I developed as scenarios. If they run this type of defense, I had already planned how I'm going to weave to get to that.
So this
Alright.
is just visual. It's not.
Yeah, visually.
It's not suggesting that once you implement your strategy, you will then backtrack and write out what that was as a way to learn from
No,
what
it's
you're
not.
executing.
It's
Okay.
not. That's not. This is a
Got it.
visual representation of how you still get
Thank
to
you.
the end with those different scenarios going forward.
although what you said did indicate that you backtracked and learned from.
Yeah, I
what
mean,
really
because the way that
happened.
we suggest doing it, right, is to say, okay, where I want to get to is, a campaign of that brings me 10,000 subscribers to my newsletter. The way I'm going to do that is by doing the following things over the course of the year, right? If everything goes well, this will work and get me 10,000. What if this happens, or what if that happens? What am I going to do if, in month 4, there's just when I'm about to do my graphic design, my graphic designer decides to quit. Bam, how do I handle that? Because God forbid something happens in the family. And that's the type of planning that helps you avoid. It's very easy in this stage for an entrepreneur to get crushed. So the more that they're planning scenarios from day one, they can avoid being vulnerable to those outside events. They will happen. How prepared are they? Whereas when you're talking about, again, the influence that you have internally, in terms of engaging people and deciding what their experience is going to be, there's a lot that you can do to plan that from your own strengths and the strengths of your company. You have the ability to make decisions and reinforce in certain areas and make calls that are going to lead to certain outcomes on the part of, meaning I could fail at my newsletter because I did not hire the right person. I can get better at hiring the right person by investing in some coaching on HR and therefore head off that problem. That's not an external threat. If I plan to have a backup graphics person in the event that God forbid something should happen to my graphics person, that's a way to avoid to plan and avoid